You will speak when this court permits you to speak. Judge Harold Mercer's voice cut through the packed courtroom like a blade dragged across stone. The gavel came down with a hard wooden crack, sharp enough to make a child in the back row start crying. One more interruption, he barked, leaning forward from the bench, and I will have you removed from this courtroom in restraints. Do you understand me? The woman standing at the defendant's table did not shrink. She did not lower her head. She did not rush to apologize. She simply placed both hands calmly on the edge of the worn wooden table and looked up at him with eyes so steady they seemed almost still. I understand you clearly, Your Honor, she said. Her voice was quiet. Too quiet for fear. Too calm for surrender. Then she added, much more clearly than you realize. A faint ripple moved through the gallery. No one in room 11F of the Philadelphia Municipal Justice Center knew what to do with that sentence. Not the clerk, whose fingers had frozen above the keyboard. Not the bailiff, who glanced nervously between the judge and the woman. Not the dozens of people waiting for their own cases, each one silently praying to get out of the building without losing their license, their paycheck, or their dignity. And certainly not Judge Harold Mercer. He stared down at the woman in the rust-colored cardigan and plain canvas shoes, seeing only what he wanted to see. A middle-aged black woman. No lawyer beside her. No expensive handbag on the table. No polished corporate armor. No visible sign of influence. Just another person he believed had walked into his courtroom powerless. That mistake would end his career. 5 hours earlier, Adrian Shaw had stood in front of the narrow mirror in her guest bathroom and studied the version of herself she had chosen for the day. Usually, the world saw Adrian in tailored cream suits, silk blouses, discreet gold jewelry, and heels sharp enough to announce her before she entered a room. She had spent 27 years building a reputation that made senior partners go silent when she spoke. She had argued before appellate panels, negotiated billion-dollar settlements, and stared down governors, police commissioners, and corporate boards without blinking. But that morning, she removed every symbol of that life. No designer watch. No diamond studs. No leather briefcase. No car service. No polished navy suit hanging in the garment bag behind her bedroom door. Instead, she wore a faded rust-orange cardigan with loose threads near one cuff, a charcoal cotton skirt that fell below her knees, and soft black canvas shoes she normally used for gardening. She twisted her silver-streaked curls beneath a simple patterned scarf and carried her documents in a plain brown folder with a bent corner. In the mirror, she looked ordinary. Forgettable. Easy to underestimate. That was the point. Adrian Shaw was not merely a lawyer. 6 weeks earlier, she had been sworn in as president of the Commonwealth Bar Council, the largest professional legal association in the state. She was the first black woman to hold the position. News outlets had called her election historic. Law schools had requested her for commencement addresses. Judges who used to ignore her letters now returned her calls within an hour. But none of that mattered that morning. That morning, she was going to court as a citizen. A traffic citation had arrived in the mail 9 days earlier. According to the notice, Adrian had failed to stop properly at a residential intersection near an empty construction zone at 10:40 on a Sunday morning. The fine itself was irritating but minor. Her staff had offered to make it disappear. A phone call. A letter. A polite note on official letterhead. By lunch, the matter could have vanished. Adrian refused. For months, she had been hearing the same complaints from public defenders, legal aid clinics, tenants' rights lawyers, and exhausted families. Municipal courts were becoming revenue machines. People were being pressured into guilty pleas without understanding their options. Judges were treating poverty like disobedience. Fines were being stacked so quickly that a $70 issue could become a financial disaster. And one name kept appearing in the complaints. Judge Harold Mercer. Not in headlines. Not in public scandals. Not yet. His damage was smaller and more routine than that. The kind of damage that happened in cramped courtrooms under fluorescent lights, where no television cameras were waiting and no powerful people were watching. He shouted at defendants. He refused to hear explanations. He punished people for asking questions. He imposed crushing fines on those least able to pay. Most disturbing of all, the complaints suggested a pattern. People of color were treated with a harsher tone, less patience, and fewer chances to be heard. Adrian had read those complaints late at night in her office, one after another, until anger settled in her chest like a stone. Then the traffic citation came, and she saw an opening. Her deputy counsel, Marisol Vega, called her before sunrise. "You can still change your mind," Marisol said. Adrian placed the plain folder into a canvas tote bag. "I already have." "I know that tone," Marisol said. "That is the tone you use when everyone else should get out of the way." Adrian almost smiled. "Good, then you understand me." "Mercer is not subtle," Marisol warned. "He has survived because he keeps his abuses small enough to look like routine courtroom management. He is careful when lawyers are present." "Then I will not look like a lawyer. You are the president of the Bar Council." "Not today." There was a pause on the line. Then Marisol said, "Please tell me you are at least taking the recording from your dashboard camera." "It is in the folder." "And the statutory language?" "In the folder." "And your receipt request?" "In my head." Marisol sighed. "You are actually going to let him do this?" Adrian looked again at herself in the mirror. The cardigan, the scarf, the shoes, the woman, the legal system so often decided not to hear. "I am going to let him show us who he is." Instead of calling for her driver, Adrian walked 6 blocks to the trolley stop. The morning air smelled like wet leaves and bus exhaust. A grey blanket of clouds hung over Philadelphia, but the rain had stopped. Office workers moved quickly along the sidewalks with coffee cups in one hand and phones in the other. A delivery truck hissed at the curb. Somewhere nearby, a street musician played a trumpet with a muted, mournful sweetness that followed Adrian down the block. On the trolley, she stood between a nurse in purple scrubs and a young man wearing a fast food uniform under a winter jacket. Both looked tired in the specific way people look tired when the day has not even begun, and they already know it will take too much from them. Adrian watched their reflections in the dark window. These were the people whose names appeared on municipal dockets. People with hourly wages. People with children to pick up. People who could not afford to miss work. People who entered courtrooms hoping for fairness and often found a machine designed to make them small. By the time she arrived at the Justice Center, the lobby was already crowded. Security officers shouted instructions as if volume could replace organization. Belts off. Phones in the tray. Empty your pockets. Move faster. An elderly man struggled to remove his shoes while balancing on one foot. A young mother searched frantically through her diaper bag. A teenager in a school hoodie asked where he was supposed to go and received a finger pointed down a hallway without explanation. Adrian moved through the metal detector without complaint. She had entered federal courthouses through marble halls and private security elevators. She had been greeted by name in rooms where the carpeting was thicker than the patience of the people inside. This place was different. The walls were scuffed. The ceiling tiles were stained. The air smelled of burnt coffee, damp coats, and fear. Courtroom 11F was at the end of a hallway painted a tired shade of institutional yellow. A handwritten sign was taped crookedly beside the door. Traffic and municipal violations. No food. No recording. No disruptions. Adrian entered and took a seat near the middle, not too close to the front, not too far back. The benches were hard enough to punish the spine. The lights buzzed faintly above. A clock on the wall clicked with exaggerated importance. People whispered to one another in tense fragments. "Do you think they'll suspend it?" "I brought the papers. My boss said if I'm not back by noon." "I don't have that kind of money." Adrian opened her folder and reviewed the citation again. The charge was wrong. The intersection named on the ticket did not match the camera footage. The officer had cited a section requiring a clearly posted stop sign. There had been no visible stop sign that morning because the sign had been removed during roadwork. Adrian's dashboard camera showed it plainly. She was not there to avoid a fine. She was there to test whether the courtroom cared about evidence. At 9:30, the side door near the bench swung open. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Municipal Court of Philadelphia County is now in session. The Honorable Harold Mercer presiding." The room stood. Judge Harold Mercer entered without looking at anyone. He was a narrow man in his early 60s, with silver hair brushed severely away from his forehead. His black robe hung from him like a curtain on a metal rod. His mouth carried a permanent downward bend, as if every person before him had arrived already guilty of wasting his time. He took his seat. Everyone else sat. Mercer shuffled papers, adjusted his microphone, and glanced at the docket. "We have a full list," he said. That means we are not here for speeches, excuses, personal tragedies, or amateur legal theories. If you are here, it is because a violation was issued. I expect responsibility. I expect efficiency. I expect respect. His eyes scanned the courtroom for the first time. Adrian watched him watching them. It was not the gaze of a public servant. It was the gaze of a man inspecting a line of inconveniences. The first case was called. A college student had been cited for riding an electric scooter on the wrong side of a marked lane. He tried to explain that construction barriers had forced him around. Mercer cut him off after 11 seconds. Your inability to navigate a street does not interest me. Fine imposed. Next. A warehouse worker had missed a prior hearing because his shift had been changed. He brought a letter from his supervisor. Mercer refused to look at it. Employment is not a magical excuse for ignoring court. Additional penalty. Next. An older woman with a cane tried to explain that she had parked in a restricted space because the accessible parking signs were blocked by a moving van. Her hands shook as she unfolded printed photographs. Mercer leaned back. Everyone has pictures now. Pictures do not make you innocent. Fine imposed. Next. Adrian listened without moving. Her face revealed nothing. Inside, she was making a record. Not with a device. With memory. With training. With the disciplined attention of a litigator who had built entire cases out of patterns other people dismissed as coincidence. Mercer interrupted black defendants more quickly. He asked sharper questions of Latino defendants. He spoke slowly and loudly to immigrants, as if unfamiliarity with procedure meant stupidity. White professionals who appeared with folders and polished shoes received a different version of him, still impatient, yes, still condescending, but less venomous, less eager to humiliate. At 10:55, a sanitation worker named Leon Baptiste approached the table. He was accused of failing to pay a city equipment fee attached to a sanitation permit. He explained that he had already paid it online and brought a printed confirmation. Mercer did not take the paper. People come in here every day waving printouts. This is from the city portal, Your Honor, Leon said carefully. Do not instruct me on what I am looking at. I am not trying to, sir. Sir? Mercer's eyes narrowed. This is a courtroom, not a sidewalk conversation. You will address me properly. Leon swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Mercer imposed the original penalty, a late fee, and an administrative surcharge. Leon stared at him. That is almost my whole week's pay. Then, perhaps next week, you will learn to follow instructions. The words landed like a slap. Adrian saw Leon's jaw tighten. She saw the bailiff shift, preparing for anger. But Leon only nodded once, picked up his papers, and walked away with the posture of a man carrying something heavy that no one else could see. Adrian wrote a few phrases in the margin of her folder. Refusal to review proof. Hostility after respectful correction. Punitive escalation. By the time her case was called, the courtroom had grown hotter. People had shed jackets. A baby fussed. The fluorescent buzzing seemed louder. The clerk called out, Docket C78216, City versus Adrian Shaw. Adrian stood. A few heads turned. She walked to the defendant's table with steady steps. Her folder was held lightly in her left hand. She placed it on the table, opened it, and looked up. Mercer did not look at her at first. Adrian Shaw, he said, reading from the docket. Failure to stop at a posted traffic control device. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. That made him look up. His eyes moved over her clothing, her scarf, her canvas shoes, her plain folder. A conclusion formed behind his eyes. Adrian watched it happen. No attorney? He asked. I am appearing on my own behalf. His mouth tightened with something that resembled amusement. Of course you are. A few people in the gallery looked down. They knew that tone. Adrian did too. Mercer tapped the citation. The officer issued a valid violation. The city's position is straightforward. With respect, Your Honor, Adrian said. The citation identifies a posted stop sign that was not present at the intersection on the date listed. I have dashboard camera footage and photographs from the city construction notice showing the sign had been temporarily removed. Mercer held up one hand. Stop. Adrian stopped. He removed his glasses slowly, as if granting the moment theatrical weight. I do not know where people get the idea that they can come into my courtroom and turn a simple traffic case into a television trial. I am not attempting to do that, Your Honor. I am asking to submit evidence that directly addresses an element of the charge. You are asking to waste this court's time. I am asking to be heard. There it was. The room changed. Not loudly. No one gasped. No one stood. But the air tightened. Mercer's face hardened. You will watch your tone. My tone is respectful, Your Honor. Your tone is argumentative. Adrian took a breath. May I approach the clerk with the exhibits? No. May I explain the statutory issue? No. The code section requires a visible posted control device. If the sign was absent due to construction, then the cited violation cannot be sustained under that provision. Mercer's palm hit the bench. I said no. The baby in the back cried again. Mercer turned his glare toward the gallery. Remove that child if you cannot keep it quiet. The mother flushed and hurried toward the aisle. Adrian did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the judge. Your Honor, she said, I have a right to present relevant evidence before a finding is entered. You have the right, Mercer snapped, to stop pretending you understand courtroom procedure because you read something on the internet last night. The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. They were sharpened for humiliation. Adrian heard a soft intake of breath from someone behind her. Mercer leaned forward. I see this constantly. People arrive with folders and attitudes, convinced they have discovered one magical sentence that will make the law disappear. That is not how this works. I agree, Adrian said. The law does not disappear. That is why I'm asking the court to apply it. His eyes widened. For the first time, he truly looked at her. Not as a docket number. Not as an inconvenience. As a threat. A small one, he thought. A threat he could crush. You will speak when this court permits you to speak, he said. The gavel came down. One more interruption, and I will have you removed from this courtroom in restraints. Do you understand me? Adrian placed both hands on the table. I understand you clearly, Your Honor, much more clearly than you realize. Mercer's cheeks colored. Oh, you think that sounded clever? Adrian said nothing. You think silence now will help you? Still nothing. He picked up the citation. Fine. Since you insisted on making this difficult, the court finds you responsible for the violation. The maximum civil penalty for the traffic offense is imposed. In addition, I am finding you in direct contempt for your disrespectful conduct and refusal to follow this court's instructions. Total due today is $2,400. The gallery reacted before it could stop itself. A low wave of shock passed from bench to bench. $2,400. For a traffic citation that had not even been argued. The clerk looked startled. The bailiff stared at the floor. Adrian remained still. Your Honor, she said, her voice now colder than before, I respectfully object to the contempt finding. I have not disrupted proceedings, used improper language, refused a lawful order, or raised my voice. I have attempted to present evidence. Denial of that opportunity, followed by punishment for making the request, creates a serious due process concern. Mercer's mouth opened slightly, then closed, then twisted. You still do not understand where you are. I understand exactly where I am. No, he said, you do not. You are in my courtroom. Adrian looked at him for one long second. That was the sentence. That was the one she knew would matter later. Not because it was the loudest, because it was the clearest. My courtroom. Not the people's courtroom. Not the law's courtroom. His. Mercer pointed toward the clerk. Pay the amount or the bailiff can escort you downstairs until arrangements are made. That will not be necessary. Adrian reached into her tote bag. For the first time, Mercer seemed uncertain. She removed a matte black metal credit card and placed it on the table. It made almost no sound, but every person close enough to see it understood immediately that something about the woman in the cardigan did not fit the story Mercer had written in his head. His eyes flickered, only for a moment. Then pride sealed the crack. Pay and leave, he said. Adrian gathered her folder and walked to the clerk's station. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes and careful hands, took the card. I need an itemized receipt, Adrian said softly. He glanced toward Mercer. Ma'am? An itemized receipt showing the traffic penalty, the contempt assessment, all administrative codes, and the time of entry. The clerk swallowed. Yes, ma'am. And I would like instructions for ordering a certified transcript of this proceeding. The clerk's fingers trembled slightly as he printed the receipt. You can file the request with the records office on the 3rd floor. Adrian lifted her voice just enough. Is the court reporter present and recording today's proceedings? The court reporter, a woman with cropped white hair and red glasses, looked up from her stenotype machine. Yes, she said. The word carried through the room. Mercer heard it. His face tightened. Adrian accepted the receipt. Thank you, she told the clerk. Then she turned back toward the bench. Have a productive afternoon, Judge Mercer. The sentence was polite. Perfectly polite. That made it worse. Mercer stared at her with open dislike. Adrian walked down the center aisle, past the people who had watched him try to crush her. A few avoided her eyes. A few looked at her with confusion. Leon Baptiste, the sanitation worker, gave her the smallest nod. She returned it. Then she pushed open the courtroom doors and stepped into the hallway. The second the doors closed behind her, the ordinary woman disappeared. Adrian Shaw took out her phone. Marisol answered on the first ring. How bad? Worse than predicted. There was a pause. Define worse. He refused evidence, mocked my understanding of the law, entered responsibility without review, imposed the maximum traffic penalty, added a contempt sanction, and said, quote, You are in my courtroom. Marisol exhaled slowly. Oh, Adrian. I need the certified transcript ordered immediately. I want the court audio preserved. I want the docket sheet, the payment record, and the contempt entry. Already moving. I also want every complaint involving Harold Mercer for the past 12 years, not just formal complaints. Legal aid letters, appellate reversals, community clinic notes, affidavits, social media clips, courthouse observer memos, anything. You want a review file? Adrian walked toward the stairwell instead of the elevator. She needed motion. No, she said. I want a removal file. Marisol was silent for half a second. Then her voice sharpened. Understood. And one more thing. Yes? The civic responsibility dinner is in 5 weeks. The one at Atlas Hall? Yes. Marisol understood instantly. Mercer has been begging for a seat at that event. I know. He wants a recommendation for the county appellate vacancy. I know that too. You want him invited? Adrian pushed through the stairwell door into the cold, echoing concrete. I want him at a front table. Marisol gave a low whistle. That is ruthless. Adrian paused on the landing. No, she said. What happened in that courtroom was ruthless. What comes next is accountability. For the next 5 weeks, Adrian Shaw did not speak publicly about Judge Harold Mercer. That silence worked in her favor. Mercer believed the matter had ended. To him, Adrian was just another defendant who had been forced to pay. He had humiliated thousands of people over the years. Most disappeared back into the city, angry but exhausted, wounded but busy surviving. Why would this one be different? So he moved through his days as he always had. He scolded defendants. He laughed with other judges in the private hallway. He complained about entitled citizens. He told clerks that society had lost respect for authority. He imposed fines with the bored cruelty of a man stamping forms. Meanwhile, Adrian's office built the case. Marisol gathered court transcripts. A retired public defender sent a list of names. A law student clinic produced summaries of 23 hearings. A courthouse volunteer admitted she had kept handwritten notes for years because Mercer's behavior bothered her so deeply. Former clerks agreed to speak confidentially. One described Mercer refusing to review proof of payment from low-income defendants. Another said he often waited until defendants were leaving to add fees they did not understand. A third recalled him joking in chambers that municipal court was where the city trained people to obey. Adrian read everything. She read it in her office after meetings. She read it at her kitchen table while soup simmered on the stove. She read it in the back seat of cars between speeches and fundraisers. The file grew from a folder to a binder. Then from one binder to 4, patterns became timelines. Timelines became evidence. Evidence became something no commission could politely ignore. Leon Baptiste agreed to submit a statement. The older woman with the cane submitted her photographs and the penalty notice. A delivery driver described losing his license after Mercer refused to accept hospital discharge papers. A single father explained how a missed hearing became a cascade of fees that cost him his apartment deposit. The stories were not dramatic in the way television liked drama. There were no car chases, no smoking guns, no hidden bank accounts. Just a judge with a robe and a habit of treating human beings as if they existed beneath him. That was enough. On the night of the civic responsibility dinner, Atlas Hall glowed above the Delaware River like a glass lantern. The building had once been a shipping warehouse. Now it had been transformed into one of the city's most coveted event spaces, with steel beams, polished concrete floors, suspended gardens, and a wall of windows looking out toward the water. Inside, tables were set with white linen, copper chargers, and tall arrangements of winter branches painted gold. The guest list was a map of power. Appellate judges, federal prosecutors, law school deans, city council members, senior partners, civil rights attorneys, major donors, journalists who knew how to recognize a career-ending moment before it was officially announced. Judge Harold Mercer arrived 20 minutes early. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that was too glossy under the lights, and a silver pocket square folded with aggressive precision. His shoes were new and pinched his toes, but he liked the way they clicked on the floor. It made him feel important. He checked his name at the registration table. The volunteer smiled. Judge Mercer, table 3. Table 3. Near the stage. His mood lifted instantly. He had spent years resenting judges who moved upward while he remained in municipal court. He believed himself overlooked, misunderstood, underappreciated. Tonight, he planned to fix that. He shook hands with anyone who mattered. He told an appellate judge that municipal court required a spine of iron. He told a law school dean that young attorneys needed to learn discipline. He told a council member that too many defendants came to court, trained by activists to disrespect authority. Several people smiled politely. A few looked for exits. Mercer did not notice. Men like him rarely noticed discomfort unless it challenged them. He was halfway through a glass of bourbon when he saw her. At first, he did not recognize her. The woman standing beside the donor wall wore a deep plum velvet suit with a structured jacket and wide-leg trousers. Her hair, no longer tucked beneath a scarf, fell in silver-black curls around her face. A sculptural bronze necklace rested at her collarbone. She stood beside the state attorney general, who was laughing at something she had said. Mercer stared. Something about her profile disturbed him. Then she turned slightly. His grip tightened around the glass. It was the woman from his courtroom, Adrian Shaw, the traffic defendant, the one with the cardigan. For several seconds, Mercer's mind rejected the evidence in front of him. She could not belong here. Not in that circle. Not speaking to the Attorney General as an equal. Not wearing that suit-like power had been sewn into the seams. Then anger rose to protect him from confusion. How had she gotten in? Was she staff? A guest of some non-profit? Someone's assistant? He placed his drink on a nearby table and crossed the room. "Excuse me," he said loudly. The Attorney General turned. Adrian turned more slowly. Her face showed no surprise. That should have warned him. It did not. Mercer pointed one finger toward her. "You." The Attorney General's expression changed. Adrian looked at Mercer as if he had arrived exactly on schedule. "Good evening, Judge Mercer." His jaw flexed. "So you remember me?" "I do." "What are you doing here?" The question was rude enough that two nearby conversations stopped. Adrian did not answer immediately. That silence drew more attention. "I am attending the dinner," she said. Mercer laughed once. It was an ugly sound. "This is a private legal event." "Yes." "For invited guests." "Yes." "You expect me to believe you were invited?" The Attorney General's eyebrows lifted. Adrienne remained composed. "I do not require you to believe anything." Mercer stepped closer. "You were in my courtroom 5 weeks ago for a traffic violation." "I was." "And now you appear at a professional dinner dressed like you belong among officers of the court?" The Attorney General said sharply, "Judge Mercer." Adrian lifted one hand, not to silence him disrespectfully, to spare him the trouble. Mercer mistook the gesture. "Do not wave your hand at me." A small semicircle had formed now. Judges, attorneys, donors, all watching. Mercer lowered his voice, but only slightly. I do not know what game you are playing, Miss Shaw, but I advise you to leave before security embarrasses you. Adrian's eyes moved to his. Security will not be necessary. I disagree. I am sure you do. His face reddened. You know, your problem is the same now as it was in court. You do not understand your place. That sentence landed differently in Atlas Hall than it had in courtroom 11F. Here, there were no crying babies. No exhausted defendants. No clerk trying not to make eye contact. Here, the people who heard him had names engraved on office doors and influence written into their calendars. And they all understood exactly what he had just said. Before anyone could respond, the lights dimmed. A clear voice filled the room through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Tonight's program will begin in 2 minutes. Adrian glanced toward the stage. Then back at Mercer. You should go to your table, Judge. I am not finished with you. Adrian leaned slightly closer. Her voice was soft enough that only he and the nearest guests could hear. No, she said, but I am finished letting you hide. Then she walked away. Not toward the exit. Toward the side stairs leading backstage. Mercer watched her go. For the first time that evening, something cold moved beneath his anger. He went to table 3 and sat down. The other guests at the table greeted him politely, but he barely heard them. His mind was working too quickly, trying to rearrange facts into something less threatening. Perhaps she was introducing someone. Perhaps she was part of a community panel. Perhaps the Attorney General knew her from some charity board. It did not matter. He would speak to security after the program. He would make sure she understood that a courtroom humiliation did not end at the courthouse doors. The chair of the dinner committee walked on stage. She was a retired federal judge named Elaine Porter, a woman whose approval carried real weight in judicial circles. Mercer sat straighter. He had sent her 2 letters in the past year, seeking support for his advancement. Good evening, Judge Porter began. Tonight, we gather not only to celebrate public service, but to confront a truth too often hidden behind ceremony. The integrity of our legal system is not measured by what we say in grand halls like this one. It is measured by what happens when no one powerful is watching. Mercer shifted in his chair. Judge Porter continued. Our keynote speaker has spent her career insisting that dignity is not a luxury item reserved for those who can afford counsel. She has fought for equal access, judicial accountability, and the principle that every courtroom belongs to the public. Mercer's fingers tightened around his water glass. She is one of the most respected litigators in the country. She is a daughter of this city, and this year she became the first black woman elected president of the Commonwealth Bar Council. The room began applauding before the name was spoken. Mercer stopped breathing. Please welcome Adrian Shaw. The applause rose into a standing ovation. Chairs scraped backward. People turned toward the stage, and Adrian Shaw stepped into the spotlight. Not as a defendant, not as an outsider, not as a woman asking permission to speak. She walked to the podium as if the room had been built for her arrival. At table 3, Harold Mercer's face drained of color. His mind reached backward, desperate to rewrite what had happened. The cardigan, the folder, the canvas shoes, the statute, the objection, the itemized receipt, the transcript request, the court reporter saying yes. Every detail returned to him with sickening clarity. He had not punished an ignorant defendant. He had created evidence against himself in front of a witness trained to destroy him. Adrian waited for the applause to settle. She looked out over the room. When her eyes found Mercer, she did not smile. That was worse. Thank you, she began. Her voice filled Atlas Hall without strain. We often speak of justice as though it lives in appellate opinions, constitutional arguments, and ceremonial speeches. But for most people, justice is not first encountered in a marble courthouse. It is encountered in crowded municipal rooms, in traffic calendars, in eviction hearings, in fines and fees, in 5-minute proceedings that can change the direction of a life. The room grew still. A person can lose a license in such a room. A job, housing, custody time, hope, and too often, the people making those decisions are never observed by anyone with the power to question them. Mercer stared at the tablecloth. 5 weeks ago, Adrian said, I entered one of those rooms without title, without counsel, and without the clothing that usually signals professional status. I went to contest a minor traffic citation. I had evidence, I had the law. I had a respectful request to be heard. A murmur began. Adrian lifted a bound transcript from beneath the podium. What I received instead was a lesson. Mercer's chair creaked. The woman beside him looked over. Adrian opened the transcript. From the official certified record, she said. Quote, "You will speak when this court permits you to speak. One more interruption, and I will have you removed from this courtroom in restraints." A collective intake moved through the hall. Adrian continued. When I asked to submit evidence that the required traffic control sign was not present, I was told I was pretending to understand procedure. When I objected to being denied the chance to present that evidence, I was punished with a contempt sanction. When I stated that due process required a hearing before judgment, the judge told me, quote, "You are in my courtroom." She closed the transcript. The sound was not loud, but Mercer felt it in his chest. Adrian looked directly at him. That statement is the disease. My courtroom, my authority, my rules, my power. Her voice sharpened. No courtroom in this state belongs to a judge. It belongs to the people. A robe is not a crown. A bench is not a throne. And contempt power is not a weapon for humiliating those a judge has decided are beneath him. Applause broke out, then stopped quickly because people wanted to hear every word. Adrian reached for another binder. After that hearing, my office reviewed more than a decade of records involving the same judge. We found repeated complaints of abusive language, refusal to consider documentary evidence, disproportionate penalties, and harsher treatment toward defendants without counsel, especially defendants of color. Mercer tried to stand. His knees did not cooperate. Judge Porter, seated near the stage, looked directly at him. Adrian turned a page. Tonight, I will not hide his name behind generalities. The judge who denied my evidence imposed an improper contempt penalty and declared the courtroom his personal domain is Judge Harold Mercer of Municipal Court, seated at table 3. 700 faces turned. The spotlight seemed to find him by instinct. Mercer sat frozen, pale and sweating, one hand gripping the edge of the table. A man who had spent years forcing others to stand alone before his judgment now sat alone before theirs. Adrian did not raise her voice. She did not need to. This afternoon, the Commonwealth Bar Council submitted a formal complaint to the Judicial Conduct Board, supported by transcripts, payment records, witness statements, case summaries, and a documented pattern of misconduct. We are requesting emergency suspension pending full disciplinary proceedings. A louder murmur swept the hall. We are also proposing reforms requiring random audits of municipal hearings, plain language rights notices for unrepresented defendants, and automatic review of contempt sanctions imposed in low-level proceedings. The public cannot trust justice that happens in the dark. Mercer pushed back his chair. The sound cut through the room. For a moment, everyone watched to see if he would speak. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The federal prosecutor across from him leaned away with visible disgust. Adrian's eyes remained on him. "Judge Mercer," she said, "you once told me I did not understand where I was. I understood perfectly. I was standing in a public courtroom, before a public servant, asserting a public right. You were the one who forgot where you were." The room erupted. This time, the applause did not stop. It grew. It rolled through Atlas Hall with force, not merely approval but release. Lawyers who had heard stories about Mercer stood. Public defenders stood first, then judges, then donors, then nearly everyone. Mercer stumbled away from table 3. No one blocked him. No one needed to. By the time he reached the exit, the story had already outrun him. A reporter near the back was typing. Another was whispering into a phone. A young legal aid attorney had tears in her eyes. Leon Baptiste, invited quietly by Adrian's office as a community witness, stood near the rear of the hall in a borrowed suit and watched the judge leave. He did not clap loudly. He simply nodded once. The next morning, Judge Harold Mercer's name was everywhere. Not because Adrian had leaked a rumor, because the record was undeniable. The transcript was real. The fine was real. The contempt order was real. The witnesses were real. The complaint was real. By noon, the Judicial Conduct Board announced an emergency review. By evening, Mercer was temporarily relieved of his docket. Within 3 days, the city's legal community was in open revolt. Public defenders submitted statements. Civil rights groups demanded review of his prior cases. Legal clinics created intake forms for people who had appeared before him. Former clerks, once afraid of retaliation, began talking. Mercer tried to defend himself. He released a statement, claiming his words had been taken out of context. That collapsed when the transcript circulated. He claimed Adrian had provoked him. That collapsed when the court reporter confirmed her tone had remained calm. He claimed the contempt sanction was lawful. That collapsed when 3 judicial ethics scholars publicly explained why it was not. He called lawyers he knew. Several did not return his calls. One agreed to meet him for coffee, listened for 12 minutes, then told him bluntly, "Harold, you are not the victim here." The disciplinary hearing began 7 weeks later. Mercer arrived with an attorney from a small suburban firm and the expression of a man who had not slept well in months. His skin looked grey. His once severe hair had grown uneven at the edges. His suit fit loosely, as if the body inside it had deflated. Adrian did not prosecute the case herself. She did not need to. The board's counsel presented the evidence with calm precision. Transcript excerpts, audio confirmation, receipts, docket entries, prior complaints, comparative penalty data, witness testimony. Leon Baptiste spoke. The older woman with the cane spoke. A former clerk spoke behind a screen to avoid public exposure. A public defender described watching Mercer frighten clients into abandoning valid defenses. A data analyst showed that Mercer imposed maximum fines at a rate dramatically higher than comparable judges, with a troubling racial disparity. Mercer's attorney objected where he could. It did not matter. The evidence had weight. Not dramatic weight, institutional weight. The kind that bends a room slowly until everyone inside knows where the truth is leaning. When Mercer finally testified, he tried to summon the old authority. He spoke about order. He spoke about respect. He spoke about difficult courtrooms and unmanageable dockets. Then board counsel asked him a simple question. "Judge Mercer, when you said, 'You are in my courtroom,' what did you mean?" He froze. For once, language did not serve him. If he said it meant nothing, he looked dishonest. If he said what he meant, he proved Adrian's point. "I meant," he said slowly, "that proceedings must be controlled." "By you?" "By the court." "But you did not say the court. You said, 'my courtroom.'" Mercer swallowed. That was a manner of speaking. Board counsel looked down at the transcript. Was calling Miss Shaw someone pretending to understand procedure also a manner of speaking? Mercer's lawyer closed his eyes briefly. The hearing lasted 4 days. The decision came 2 weeks later. Judge Harold Mercer was removed from the bench. The board's written opinion described his conduct as abusive, discriminatory in effect, hostile to due process, and incompatible with judicial office. It recommended further review by the state disciplinary authority regarding his fitness to practice law. For a man like Mercer, removal was not only professional discipline, it was identity collapse. He had built his life around being obeyed. Without the robe, his voice became ordinary. Without the bench, his anger had nowhere official to sit. The appellate vacancy he had coveted disappeared from his future. Invitations stopped, calls went unanswered. His former colleagues referred to him carefully as Harold now, not Judge Mercer. 6 months later, Adrian Shaw stood in a different municipal courtroom. Not as a defendant, not as a keynote speaker, as an observer. The room looked like many others, hard benches, nervous people, a crowded docket. But near the entrance, a new sign explained defendants' rights in plain language. A legal aid table sat beside the clerk's window. Proceedings were randomly audited. Contempt sanctions required, written justification and review. The reforms were imperfect. All reforms were, but they were real. A young judge on the bench listened patiently as a delivery driver explained that road work had blocked a sign. The judge reviewed the photographs, checked the city notice, and dismissed the citation. No speech, no humiliation, no performance of power. Just the law doing what it was supposed to do. Adrian watched from the back row. Marisol stood beside her. "Worth it?" Marisol whispered. Adrian looked at the delivery driver as he walked out, relief loosening his shoulders. "Yes," she said. "You know Mercer filed another appeal." "I know." "You worried?" Adrian almost smiled. "No." Outside, The afternoon sun had broken through the clouds. Light spilled across the courthouse steps, brightening the stone and the faces of people leaving with papers in their hands. Adrian paused at the top step. She thought about the day she had walked into courtroom 11F in a rust-colored cardigan, carrying a folder no one wanted to read. She thought about Mercer's gavel, his contempt, his certainty, the way he had looked at her and seen weakness because he could not imagine power without decoration. That had been his fatal flaw. He believed dignity could be measured by clothing. He believed intelligence announced itself through status. He believed people without visible influence could be mistreated without consequence. But justice has a long memory when someone decides to write things down. Adrian descended the steps. A woman near the bottom recognized her and hesitated. "Miss Shaw?" Adrian turned. The woman held a court notice in one hand and a toddler's backpack in the other. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said. "They actually explained my options today. Nobody yelled." Adrian felt something in her chest soften. "I am glad," she said. The woman nodded, embarrassed by her own emotion, then hurried toward the bus stop. Marisol watched her go. "That is the part they never understand," she said. Adrian looked across the street, where traffic moved under the pale gold light. "What part?" "That power is not always about destroying someone." Adrian adjusted the strap of her tote bag. "No," she said. "Sometimes power is making sure the next person does not have to be destroyed at all." That evening, Adrian returned to her office. The city lights glittered beyond the glass. Her desk was covered with drafts of the Municipal Court Reform Bill, letters from community groups, notes from legislators, and a framed photograph from the night she had been sworn in as Bar Council President. In the photo, she stood with one hand raised, taking an oath to serve the law. Not to possess it. Not to bend it toward ego. To serve it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marisol appeared. Final update. Mercer's law license suspended, pending full disciplinary review. Adrian read it twice. She did not celebrate. She did not smile with satisfaction. Instead, she looked out over the city and thought of all the people whose cases had come before his, people who had walked away believing the law had no room for them. One judge removed did not repair everything. One public exposure did not heal every wound. But it mattered. A locked door had opened. A hidden room had been lit. A man who thought the bench made him untouchable had learned the oldest truth of public power. Authority is borrowed. Accountability is permanent. Adrian picked up her pen and returned to the reform bill. There were still hearings to audit. Still records to review. Still judges to train. Still people to protect. And somewhere, in another courtroom, someone ordinary was standing before someone powerful, hoping to be heard. Adrian intended to make sure they were. Because the robe does not make a ruler. The courtroom does not belong to the judge. And the people who are told to remain silent are sometimes the very ones who bring the whole room to its feet.